2014 Obama White House Champion of Change for STEM access and diversity, Harvard Young American Leader. She is the author of How to Start a Business on a Ramen Noodle Budget and Focused. So please give a warm IWF Florida Suncoast welcome to Felecia Hatcher. And if you'll go to your speaker view, you'll get to see Felecia in living color when she begins to speak.
Hey, everyone. Everyone looks amazing. We definitely don't look like what we've been through over the past 8 months at all. And so thank you, Mary, so much for the warm introduction and the invitation to join you all tonight. As a fellow IWF sister, I'm based in Miami and I'm part of that chapter. And so we're going to talk about quite a few things tonight. One, I'm going to share a few slides to kind of ground our conversation. And my goal is to actually leave a lot of time for question and answer, because this is such an important topic, especially over the last few months, right? And so give me a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go full screen so that you can see all of the epicness of this presentation. And so we're going to talk about amplifying your diversity and what that means for you personally and what it means for your lived experience in all the rooms that you walk into and all the different hats that you wear. And so Mary read the whole bio, so I'll keep it really quick. I am Felecia. I help people amplify their mindset, their message, and their impact by building inclusive innovation.
I had a button that
so that brilliant people can confidently get in front of people that can say yes to their ideas, their products, and their services. And I've had a really interesting
Excuse me, Felecia, I'm going to ask everybody to mute themselves so that we
get muted on my own. I'm out of it now.
All right. Hit the mute button for me and I'll make sure I get through this really fast so that we can actually have a conversation around this. And so I've been featured on a bunch of press that have kind of acknowledged our work over the years around supporting entrepreneurs and really helping people on two sides, inclusive innovation and then personal transformation and stepping into your zone of genius. And so we're going to be really kind of rooting our conversation and grounding our conversation around diversity. But I kind of put two of my talks together because I also want to talk about what personal transformation means to each and every one of us in this moment that we're in, where so much of the conversation is around designing what the new normal is and playing a big role in that. And then how us as women can take up as much space as possible as we want to in this world, especially when we support other women and other groups doing the exact same thing. And so I love this quote, and I want to kind of start here. It's James Clear. He's actually the author of the book Atomic Habits, a book I highly, highly recommend. And when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, it's a lot of us kind of put this as a goal. Maybe it's a part of our key performance indicators, our KPIs, but it really boils down to systems and systems on both sides. And so James says, we don't rise to our goals, we fall to our systems. And so for generations, depending on what your lived experience is and how you show up in the world, there have been systems that have put in place to actually stop you from being able to be you. Be a human, have human emotions, basic Maslow's needs being able to be met around safety and access to just things that we need to survive in order to manifest the dreams that we want to have and the dreams that we want our kids and our families and our friends to be able to be a part of. And so that's one part of systems. The other part of systems is when we're talking about implementing new practices that also requires systems as well. It's not okay to just post a social media hashtag or a post, but we actually have to implement the things that we want to see and how we want the world to be so that it is equitable and fair for everyone. And so there's two system conversations that we need to be thinking about and not just saying something, but what does it actually mean to us? And then how are we going to embed that into everything that we do moving forward? And so I'm the director of the Center for Black Innovation. I co-founded it. You heard quite a few things in my bio. We've actually brought that into one organization. And so for 6 years, we have been doing this work around ridding communities from being innovation deserts, specifically Black and Brown communities. I heavily work in the tech space and support technology entrepreneurs, and then also everyday people where I understand how transformational technology can be, because it has been transformational for my life over the years. I was a C student in high school who was able to teach myself how to code. I could rewire cable into my bedroom, even though my parents told me that I could not. I thought I could. I thought I was MacGyver. You couldn't tell me as a kid that I couldn't solve every problem possible with a safety pin and some rubber bands. But in classroom, I was a C student. But I ended up winning $130,000 in scholarships as a C student in high school. And it was at that moment where it taught me my greatest lesson around human potential. And when you realize that there's more than one pathway to success and not letting anyone stand in the way of you being able to achieve your dreams. And so that's what I've dedicated my life to these days, right? It's Code Fever. We have trained over 3,000 students personally into intro to computer programming, access to digital literacy, and how to navigate a startup ecosystem as a person of color. Hold on, where did my slides go? Sorry about that. Something crazy just happened. Can you guys still see that? Perfect. Okay. And then Black Tech Week is a national conference. We run a venture capitalist in residence program, and then an innovation space as well in the Overtown area of Miami. We've been supported by some really cool and great organizations, from the Knight Foundation to the Cerner Foundation to NBC Universal to Etsy and Capital One. And every day we get to walk into a really phenomenal innovation space in a community that oftentimes people have overlooked as not having any innovation potential at all. And so what I really want to talk to you about is, what does diversity actually mean to you personally? And this is when we're going to activate the chat really quick, because I want to hear from you. Like, what does diversity mean to you personally? Because there's so many things that are thrown around about what it is and what it can be, but it's a personal role that we need to play in it. And it needs to mean something, and it should mean something different really to each and every one of us. And so let me pull up the chat so that I can see. Let's get some comments rolling. All right. Come on, tell me, what does diversity mean for you? There's no wrong answers tonight. Okay, great. Inclusiveness, diversity, it means difference of thought, gender, and color. My understanding of the world is not limited to my lived experience. I love it. Creating better work through differences, acknowledging differences, right? There's nothing wrong with being different. And so many things that we talk about standing out. And then in this instance, we often talk about, not acknowledging someone's difference. And when we say we don't acknowledge color or gender, that actually means that you don't see that person. And at the end of the day, what we want as human beings is to not only be seen and acknowledged, but we want to be heard, right? So celebrating differences, fitting into other cultures, inclusion. I'm going to go through two more. Diverse socioeconomic groups, diversity in thought, limitless openness, making room for many viewpoints. I love it. Now let's answer this question. What does inclusion mean to you? Someone said a flower garden. I love that. I like that. Passion for learning new and different things. What does inclusion mean? No one left behind. I love it. A good friend of mine, Michael, he often talks about diversity being invited to the party, and we're having a party tonight, right? And then inclusion being actually asked to dance, and not just be invited and kind of being on the sideline, but can you come in and dance with us? Can you come in and contribute with us? Can we build this together? Can we have a shared success as we align with common goals? It is literally stretching your hand out to another human being and say, come along with me. And there's a lot of different ways that you can expand upon diversity and inclusion, but I really like that because we understand what it means to be a wallflower. We understand what it means to maybe invited into the room, and then our voices are being silenced in those exact rooms that people are telling us are open doors for us to be in, and that this is a safe space. We understand what it means to build company cultures or be a part of company cultures. Absolutely. I love the dance example. Being heard, acknowledging differences, says Beth. I am white. I know that I am not colorblind. None of us are. I simply choose to treat others the same and all things equal. Give the advantage to women and minorities. I think we are better the more diverse we are. Absolutely. And so this screen that I want to kind of tell you a few stories is really important. And so the top screen represent so many different people that are part of the community that we've built with our work over the years. The last three on the screen each have very different stories, but they have a commonality that they were all at some point students here in South Florida, in Miami. And so probably two of these pictures at the bullet low, the left and in the middle, are very recognizable images. They're globally recognized. The other young lady I'm going to tell you about in just a bit. And so most of us are familiar with Jeff Bezos, right? More than likely, you probably have a package that came in today, or it's sitting on your porch. Under the pandemic, we have been using these fingers like crazy to order all kind of stuff that was probably unnecessary, but you know that he founded Amazon. And at one point, he was a high school student here in Miami. And so when we talk about diversity and inclusion and about who gets to be an innovator, who gets the luxury to be able to participate in this great nation that we live in, we also have to tell the other story. And so the other person to the left of Jeff Bezos was also a high school student here in Miami, and who was gunned down in an area in Central Florida wearing a hoodie. He had two things in his hand, right? I think an iced tea and Skittles. And however you felt about the case, he was still a young student and he was still a young child that was just merely walking home from the store. Why is he in this story? He's in this story for a very specific reason, because most of us know all these different things about him, but we don't know is that Trayvon was actually in an aeronautical program. The news never covered that. Why? He was in an aeronautical program and he wanted to pursue a career in STEM. He was in a mentorship program as well. My business partner was actually one of the founders of that program. These are two high school students in Miami, Jeff Bezos and then also Trayvon Martin. The other young lady, her name's Jada. A good friend of mine was her godmother. And Jada, the day before she was actually shot and killed in Miami for a bullet that was meant for her dad, and got accepted into a program called Black Girls Code at 6 years old. And so what we understand about diversity and inclusion and how it seeps into our everyday lives is that talent is equally distributed by zip code, but opportunity is not. And that when we truly talk about what we're going to do and the role that we're going to play into building whatever the new normal is or the world that we want to live in, we have to move faster than bullets. And we have to understand that everything is not equitable and fair to everyone that's to the left and the right of us, and that we can play a much bigger role in that. I often like to give this example as well when we talk about opportunity and diversity and inclusion and what that means. And so most of us are very familiar with Uber and Lyft, right? Let me know in the chat if you've ever taken Uber pool. It's kind of brutal, but it exists, right? You can pile in a bunch of strangers into a vehicle and you're paying, a few dollars to go from destination A to destination B. And so if you're familiar with the exact same utility of Uber pool, then what about the Tap Tap in Miami, or the Jitney taxi in New York, or the Judah taxi in Jamaica, or the Tap Tap in Haiti? And so these were vehicles that solved the exact same utility of strangers piling into a vehicle to go from point A to point B. The exact same utility. These things existed in our communities that are often overlooked 30 years ago, solving very global transportation infrastructure problems out of necessity because of a lack of infrastructure in those communities. And so I'm going to keep going. These are some funny pictures. I love Dave Chappelle, and hopefully I get to tell you a story about something his dad said to him at the end. Crowdfunding. Ray, tell me if you're familiar with crowdfunding. This peer-to-peer goal, putting $1 in and $5 here to equal whatever the big financial goal that you're trying to meet. All these companies here at the bottom, right? Kickstarter, Indiegogo, are companies that have raised millions of dollars to support their work of building these platforms. Well, in the Black church, we crowdfund every single Sunday. It's called Passing the Plate. Funny picture here with Dave Chappelle. But prior to that, in Jamaica, where my mom is from, we called it partner, this peer-to-peer kind of coming together, saving money in order to be able to fund a big project. And in the continent of Africa, for literally centuries, it's been called Susu. So it's not for a lack of opportunities in diverse communities. The ideas are there, they've been solved out of necessity. It's about how we actually look at these communities. I'll give you another prime example. After slavery ended, there was some Black people that were actually able to buy their freedom, and they bought homes, and people would pile into these homes and share whatever they can to kind of make up the payments. That's the exact same utility of Airbnb. And so I'm giving you these examples because oftentimes when we're talking about diversity and differences and creating opportunities and who gets things and who does not, and how we value things and how we do not value things or value people, we also have to peel back the history. We can talk about Florida and the state that we live in being founded by a woman. And at the same time, women facing so many different issues around equity and support and childcare and equal pay. We have to peel back the history in order to be able to move forward. That's a big reason why we produce reports with the work that we do around the deficit framing of Black entrepreneurship in foundations, corporations, and media, and how we truly look at diversity in ecosystems and building equitable ecosystems for our communities. I actually want to play you a video really quick, so give me a second, because I want to do a quick exercise. Okay, hopefully everyone's paying attention. You got to pay attention for this exercise.
The monkey business illusion. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball.
Can anyone tell me how many times the team in white passed the ball?
11.
13.
13.
14. 14.
Hold on.
The correct answer is 16 passes. Did you spot the gorilla?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome. Anyone did not see the gorilla? Don't be shy.
I didn't.
Okay. And the first time I did this exercise, I didn't either.
The first time I did it, I didn't either.
For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half missed the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the Black team leaving the game?
No.
Yes.
Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold. When you're looking for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events. And that's the monkey business illusion.
All right.
That's great.
Uh-oh, hold on, give me a second. Go back to the slides. All right. And so I love doing that exercise. A great mentor of mine actually developed a framework around asset framing. And it's so important when we talk about diversity and inclusion and like, how do we actually move forward from this conversation to have real impact in our lives and the lives of everyone in our communities and the work that we do and the communities that we serve. And so asset framing is an approach to understanding diverse communities, and it challenges one to view people and communities based on their talents rather than their struggles. And I love doing the monkey business exercise because when we only focus on one specific thing, or when we only look for one type of person to do business with, or to break bread with and share with and invite into our homes, and only one way of doing things, we oftentimes actually not just do a disservice to those people, but we do a disservice to ourselves. And so the monkey business, I actually recommend, if you did not see the monkey, to go back and do the exercise quite a few times. But I hope it also raised some questions within ourselves about what does it truly mean to say, I understand and I respect being diverse. And it's a part of my everyday lived experience. A lot of the conversation around this actually has to do with bias. And so consciousness and being kind of consciously biased defines our thoughts, our actions, and how we harness and kind of the utility of what our thoughts are and what our movements are. Subconscious, is defined as the reactions and actions we realize when we think of something. Like, why do I feel this way? Martha Beck, who I think is a brilliant author, often talks about doing body compass work. And I suggest, we don't have time because I broke down a much larger presentation into about 20 minutes, but I love to take people through body compass work when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, when we're recognizing our own personal biases that we have, and everyone has bias. Every single person has bias. It's baked into our lived experiences. Some of it actually protects us. Some of it makes us miss opportunities and connection points with people that we would actually gel with if we did not have these biases that were kind of blinding us. And so there's consciousness, there's subconscious, and then there's unconscious. And it's defined as the deep recesses of our past and our memories that actually guide what we do and how we show up and how we treat people. And so what I want to ask you is, like, what is your personal commitment to diversity and equity? If anyone wants to kind of chime in on, like, what does that mean for you personally? Because oftentimes we work for companies or we build companies and we develop diversity statements, but we don't actually ask, what does it mean to me personally? And then, have I done the work to get the results that I'm hoping to achieve with my diversity and inclusion practices? Whether that's the company, and then what does it mean to me personally? Whether you're building a company or an organization or a movement, what do these words actually mean? And what do they look like lifted off these pages and actually implemented? Implemented. Goodness gracious, it's a Wednesday afternoon or Tuesday afternoon. Look at that. Where's my drink, right? This is a party. And so what I always like to tell people around this is you cannot expect results from work that you have not done. And so when you do a personal assessment or you do a company assessment and say, have we actually done the work? Have we just said, this is hard, and kind of left it there? But you are brilliant people solving large problems much bigger than ourselves oftentimes. And so we're not allowed to just say this is hard, and so we're not going to dedicate the time to doing it. We're not just going to say this is hard, and we're not going to do the deep personal work to address whatever biases that we have, whatever experiences have brought us to that point, and say, I'm committed to being different. I'm committed to showing up different. I'm committed to being more respectful. I'm committed to creating more opportunities for others. And so when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we also have to settle around our personal transformations and really kind of stepping into our zone of genius and what that actually means for us. And so what I wanted to ask you, and I ask a lot of questions when I do presentations, is something that came up in a show that I was watching called Lovecraft Country on HBO. And two women were having a conversation. And what one lady asked to the other is, who are you uninterrupted? As a woman, if nothing stood in the way of you being your bold, badass self, who would you be? What was the time where life interrupted you, or someone interrupted you, or something stood in the way? This is a question I ask a lot of the startup founders that I work with who are raising significant money and building companies, or oftentimes the first person in their lives to do this thing that they're doing. Is something interrupted them? And unfortunately, a lot of times it's something around diversity and inclusion. Someone ignored them. Someone didn't answer their email. Someone ghosted them. Someone made them feel less than what they were building. But this is much more far reaching because this is actually something that happens to all of us. As we walk into rooms, can we hold our shoulders up high and boldly step into the rooms that we're in if we were not interrupted? And so who are you uninterrupted? What interrupted you? And now that you know what interrupted you, how are you going to move forward? And for a lot of us, the pandemic interrupted us. It interrupted our lives. It interrupted the goals that we had, the paths that we want to take. And so I want to take you through a quadrant really quickly around the Zone of Genius framework. And if anyone is familiar with this, please raise your hand. It's been life transformational for me ever since I picked up Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap, quite a few years ago. And so I'm going to take you through this really quick. And I want you to be thinking in kind of two frames of mind. One, personally, what is my zone of genius? And then when you're talking about the companies that you run or you work for and our core competence around diversity and inclusion, where do we fall within this? And so your zone of incompetence is, I'm going to do this from a personal standpoint first. Your zone of incompetence is actually the things that you do that you really suck at. Like, you're probably the worst in the world at doing these things. And it's really hard for people to like admit to this. And so this is personal work that you can do. And I'll make sure I share this worksheet with Mary and the team so that you can have it and actually do the work. But if you want to, you have a piece of paper along with your drink, right? A vertical line and a horizontal line and a vertical line, and you can do this really quick. So your zone of incompetence are all the things that you do that you have no business doing. You're actually the worst in the world at these things. You suck at these things. And it's really hard to say that because our lives and society has actually taught us that we don't talk about the things or admit to the things that we suck at, because we really, and we should be trying to perfect those things instead of focusing our full time and attention and energy on the things that we are innately good at and supporting and building and putting a support structure around that. Your zone of competence is you are actually kind of good at these things. But it's also a zone of low return for you. The time that you spend in these areas could be much better spent. Your zone of genius is, or your zone of excellence is, you are actually really good at this thing. You probably are paid really well for it. It's probably the thing that people come to you often, but your body has kind of this angst of saying, is this it for me? Am I being the best steward of my gifts if I only stay in this box and do the things that I write down in here? I'm great at these things, but this is also really comfortable. And I also realize that there are new levels with my name on it. Am I willing to step out in order to achieve those things or reach that higher height when I realize that there's something that's a bigger calling for me? Your zone of genius is you actually saying, I am the best in the world at doing this thing. No one does it better than me. And by saying that, that doesn't take away from anyone else, but you are boldly saying, this is it for me. I am being the best steward of my gifts. That date between the day that I'm born and the day that I leave this earth, that dash that is there, I am playing full out in that dash. I am supporting people at the highest extent of which I can support them. And I am going to make my money, right? The income potential that I want to have is in this box. A lot of times people don't like to own zone of genius. Why? And I don't understand this, because if you needed to get brain surgery and a neurologist needed to cut into your head, I'm pretty sure if your neurologist said, oh, you know, doing this is kind of like my zone of incompetence or competence, you're going to hightail it out of there, right? And so if we expect people that do things for us to be boldly sitting in and working in their zone of genius, why don't we expect that of ourselves? Because we expect it of others. And then the last part of that, and this is where Gay Hendricks starts, these are two areas in where I kind of take over, because I'm like, this has to lead to your zone of opportunity. And your zone of opportunity is really important for a number of reasons. It's important because it's how you're going to do your best work. It's also the commonality between everything that you put into this box is going to unlock the opportunities of what the next level that you know has your name on it and where you're supposed to be. So how do you then do this personally? Because that's personally important of doing this deep work and doing the worksheet. But then the other part of that is, let's talk about zone of genius from a diversity and inclusion standpoint in the work that you do, the committees that you're on, the boards that you're in. And where does diversity line up with how you guys are presently showing up and your intention? Is it a zone of incompetence? Is it a zone of competence? Are you able to say it's a zone of excellence, but there's something a little bit more that we can do? Or are you ready to say boldly, diversity and inclusion, our practices, everything that we put together is our zone of genius. No one does it better than we do. And of course, there's always room for improvement in zone of genius. The best people that are boldly in their zone of genius, or the best companies, are also lifetime students. You can move forward. There's always more that you can do. But at the end of the day, you know that you're boldly saying yes to this and equity and inclusion and support for everyone and everything that you're building. I'm going to skip through a few things because I'm almost at time, but I want to ask you another specific question. And I want to chat with you about my daughter, Ori, really quick. My daughter, she's actually 7 years old, and I love this picture of her. She just celebrated her birthday 2 weeks ago. She's still, mind you, celebrating her birthday. She celebrates her birthday all year long, every year, for very good reason. My daughter, when she was born, she weighed 1.4 pounds when she was born. She literally fit in the palm of my hand. And I remember going into labor, not even really fully understanding what was going on, and kind of waking back up. And the neonatologist told myself and my husband that you need to go into the NICU and visit your daughter as much as possible because they didn't think she was going to make it through the night. She actually had a 1% life expectancy. They didn't think she was going to make it through the night. And I remember going into the NICU in this place that I did not even know existed. But it's one of those places where you hope that you never have to end up there, but you thank God that it does exist if you do. And I'm sitting in front of this incubator and all these noises are going off, these ding, ding, dings, and these machines, and people are talking and people are moving around, and there's all these other incubators, and I'm sitting there in a moment where life had literally punched me in the gut and I did not know how to get back up. And for a lot of us, life has punched us in the gut in this past year. It's been uncertain, things have been crazy, they've been chaotic. And I just remember sitting there, not even understanding, but just saying, I need her to make it through the next night. Because if she can make it through the next night, she can make it through the following night. And a nurse, and lovely Jamaican nurse, and I laugh because my mom's Jamaican, the same kind of energy. And she walks past, she looks at myself and my husband through the incubator, and she's like, oh, she's gonna be fine. And she says, is she a girl? And she says, she's gonna be just fine. And she beelines it out the back door, and we were sitting by the back door. Day number 2, we make it to day number 2. So what our neonatologists and their team told us, we made it to the next day, even though they said it was almost impossible. Long story short, we're sitting there, again, ding, ding, dings, all these things are going off. And that same nurse, like she didn't ask us the exact same question in the exact same place before, said to us, she's like, is that a girl? And I'm like, I was like, yeah. She's like, oh, she's gonna be just fine. And like proceeds to try and beeline it out the door again. I'm like, no, you have to come back here and tell us why she's going to be okay. Because the neonatologist and the entire team told us a less than 1% chance of life expectancy. And what she said to me stuck with me and has stuck with me for the past 7 years. And I tell myself, anytime I'm around a group of women, I always like to share this story. And so what she said to me is, I've been a NICU nurse for over 20 years. And I literally have seen tragedy, sad moments, and I've also seen miracles. And what I have come to realize in my 20 years of being a NICU nurse is that when we're talking about some of the most vulnerable children possible, literally being the smallest person on this earth, she's like, the studies have shown that girls actually fare better than boys when they're born premature. And it took me a full week, ladies, to actually fully understand what she meant by that. And so when you're literally the smallest person on this earth, when you literally have every single thing stacked up against you, there's something innately in us as women where we're kind of built for tough. And I'm just like, I wonder how many of us, if we knew that about us, that was something that was innately in us, of how we would show up bigger and bolder than ever before. I wonder if every single one of us knew that, how we would show up for other women bigger and bolder than ever before. I wonder if we knew this about ourselves as women, that we would not let any BS stand in the way from supporting people that are different than us, because collectively we can all come together and shake things up and absolutely change the world. We have it innately in us. And this moment for a lot of us this past year, and I know I'm over my time, so forgive me, Mary, this moment, this time, this year has called on us to be bigger and bolder in ourselves, even when life has punched us in the gut. But transformation within ourselves, our companies around diversity and inclusion is a big thing to bite off. And so if you take any other lessons from me today, take the lesson from my daughter, Ori, of just committing to get 1% better every single day. One step moving forward in this new direction, this right direction. You don't have to get it perfect. You just have to commit. This is your moment of obligation. And I'm an Echoing Green Fellow, Global Fellowship, and this is something that we talk about, and I'm closing out. And we talk about when problems that exist in the world are so much bigger than ourselves. And we look out and say, if not me, then whom? And when you ask, if not me, then whom, and you cannot solve or find anyone that is the whom, it's your turn to look back at yourself and say, am I going to solve this problem? Or am I okay? Am I okay with this problem continuing to fester in our communities, in our cities, in our states, in our organizations across the globe? And if you are not okay with that, this is your moment of obligation to say, yes, that I'm going to play a role in solving a problem much bigger than myself. It is what many of our forefathers have done, our foremothers have done as well. You think of Julia Tunnell, you think of Gandhi, you think of Martin Luther King. They woke up every day with big, bold, audacious goals, and also had to sit as leaders and say, what I'm trying to solve, I may not see a solution or even an inch forward within my lifetime, but I'm going to wake up every single morning committed to solving that problem. But that starts with intention. And so D&I efforts, us as women stepping up boldly and big and audacious than ever before, means that we need to start with intention. Some of it means, putting on our Superwoman cape. Some of it means taking off our emotional Spanx. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Spanx we wear, kind of holding everything in. We need to take it off and let everything out so that we can be who we need to be for the women that are waiting for us to show up bigger and bolder in the positions that we're in to make a path for them and ultimately change the world for futures to come. Thank you all so much.
Wow. So Felicia, we're going to ask everybody for their questions. I have a question from Lee Roper Batker. Her question is, the systems do fail us.
Mm-hmm.
Which systems do you see as keys to unlocking opportunity, and what strategies do you recommend in these polarized times?
Yeah, a lot.
A small question, huh?
Yeah. There are big systems, right? And so we can talk about our oh gosh, I'm losing my train of thought. We can talk about our legal systems, right? And the roles that they play. We can talk about our law enforcement, which has been like on blast this past year more than ever before about inequity practices, even around mental health, and should they even be playing a role in those kind of calls? Like, there's so much around that, right? But it's across the board: housing, education. I think education, we saw some of the biggest inequities because everyone thought that the digital divide was no longer a problem. And I'm like, how? And then when we realized that schools were not able to open and that there was going to be a further brain drain with our young people that did not have access to hardware, or even in a moment when we're talking about like Wi-Fi connectivity is a basic Maslow's need now, right? Like, that is how we function. And also young people and businesses not having the connectivity and understanding has been a big problem. And so if you are in an influential role in any of those systems, can you play a bigger role? The other part of it is accountability, right? Not just personal accountability, but we all know, for lack of better, we know assholes around us, right? There's no other word to say it. Like, we all know these people around us. And for some of us, we turn a blind eye. Can we check that person and say, if you value our friendship, if you value our business relationship, these are non-negotiables for me. These are lines that I am not willing to cross in order to do business with you. These are lines that I'm not willing to cross in order to vouch for you because I don't believe in what you're doing, because it's actually unfair. And ultimately, it could be very much detrimental to the people that we are serving and where we're trying to go. And so it's advocacy for sure. It's accountability for as well. And then it's action, right? We don't have the luxury, as much as I love my iPhone, to just kind of tweet about something or make a post and say, I've done my job. In a lot of ways, social media activism is a real thing because it amplifies messages. But in a lot of ways, it makes people say, I'm done. That's all I have to do. And we can always do much more.
So Susie Bowie wants to know, where do you most often see that amazing intention kind of get stuck or fall short? I mean, are there sort of natural places where people get stuck?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest place that I feel people get stuck is getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And so we've gone largely throughout our lives not having to have conversation about gender, about race, about sexual orientation. It's the thing that we can kind of dance around. And then when we're directly faced with having those conversations, we get so uncomfortable that we're going to say the wrong thing, that we're going to end up trending on Twitter, that we actually don't say anything at all. And so it's that, and the best way to start having those conversations is to have those conversations. One of the most powerful things that I think an individual and a business can actually say is like, we don't have the answer, but we're committed to figuring this thing out. That is one of the most powerful things that you can actually say, because it starts a dialogue, but then it also brings both of you or whoever down to this level where you have a commonality. I don't. And it's really hard for me to say I don't have an answer, but I'm committed to finding the answer. I'm committed to finding a solution, no matter how long it takes. I think, one of the things that has happened with the work that we do around diversity and inclusion with companies is, when the video came out with George Floyd, we were bombarded with phone calls. Like, can you solve this problem? Can you consult us? Can you do all these things? And can you do it by Friday? And I'm like,
Did you
no.
get the magic wand out?
Right. And I'm like, actually, no. And if that is what
That's
you
right.
want, we're not the right person for you to work with, because what you need to say right now is exactly what I said. We're committed to doing this. And however long it takes for us to figure this out, we're going to figure this out. And that is a statement that you can release within itself, right? And people can respect that. Like, we effed up, and we're gonna figure this out is also okay to say as well. But it has to start with something. If we're silent, we can also very much be complicit in our silence. And I think we're just in this moment where we don't have the luxury to be silent and kind of stand or sit when things need to just really move in a lot of different directions really fast.
So Natalie Costello is curious about whether there are case studies that you would hold up to us as people who've really gotten past the stuck point, really do D&I well.
Yeah. Oh, I would say, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Pillar of Change. I think they're a phenomenal organization that has done a lot in this space, holding companies accountable, but then also being accountable within themselves.
Now, I'm sorry, say the name again.
Yeah, Color of Change.
Color of Change.
Yeah. I would say them. I would say Target actually has done a lot, not just in the past few months, but really over the years. And it's really interesting. I lived in Minnesota for a while. My husband worked at Target, so I used to get like all the back end of how crazy things were. But then also hear like firsthand how they were kind of committed to moving things forward. Why I mentioned them, and it's not just because I love Target, is for a lot of organizations, diversity and inclusion ends up being one department. It's one department that's usually a part of HR or adjacent to HR, and it's their problem. And what really needs to happen is it needs to be baked into every single department, should be committed to a diversity and inclusion practice and then action, right? The key word about it is a practice. You are going to constantly iterate until you get this thing right, but it's going to be a constant commitment. And then matching dollars to that. Why? Because when we put dollars against something, we actually are holding people accountable. And then we are measuring that as a part of our key performance indicators. We invest in things that we value. And when we value things, we measure those things on impact, and we iterate year over year or quarter over quarter on, are we doing this right? What should we add? What should we take away? What needs more time? And so it's also that, right? And a lot of people don't like to have that conversation. But I'm like, if you put dollars into R&D because you're expecting a return. And if you're expecting a return, people are going to show up and do the work. And it's not going to be this passive thing. You know, I run a nonprofit, but I get so upset about charity oftentimes because I'm like, we don't have expectations for charity. We don't expect an ROI. We want the feel good, which is important, and we want the organizations to do the work, but you should have an expectation on a return if you are investing your dollars. And if you're investing your dollars to solve this specific problem, then you should also be measuring that. And the data should give you insights on how to be able to move forward.
So Linda Solomon would like to know, a lot of companies and organizations thought they had successful efforts underway. They had their diversity officers, they had a diversity plan until this year.
Yeah.
And so how are you seeing organizations rethink and redefine those that had mature efforts and now they see them wanting? How were they reassessing?
Yeah, you know, the interesting thing kind of working in this space is I have a lot of friends that are in this space. And around March and kind of going into April, a lot of them lost their jobs. It was one of the positions that was getting cut left and right. And it was really devastating. And then what was that, May or June, they were in high demand. And so it kind of goes back to what I mentioned before about accountability and making sure things are well funded and that it's a practice that's baked into every single department. What does it look like in your marketing department, procurement? What does it look like in not just HR, but like your sales department? Like, what does it look like? And is there because it's fine to have one person dedicated, right? That kind of oversees things, but it shouldn't have been like the diversity and inclusion person was nixed, and like that's not a priority for us right now. Survival is a priority. But what happens when we are not supporting what we feel like is possibly like the weakest player, right? I play basketball, so we often talk about like being the weakest player, and you're only as strong as your weakest player, and you're only as a company or an organization as strong as like the weakest intention that you have around the work that you're doing. If you're dedicated and truly dedicated to this, you have to be dedicated to the long term, no matter how long it takes for you to be able to figure out. But it really kind of goes back again to that should not have been the trend that was happening, that these were some of the first jobs to be cut, because what it was saying is during a global pandemic where we're going to have to restructure, we're slicing or cutting the fat. And this was just this ancillary thing that we did because we felt that we had to do. But in times of crisis, we don't really truly need to support this. Like it just sent such a disgusting message, right? Again, from someone kind of being in this space, like how can we be better about what we're doing? And not just because it's like the social media thing, so we're going to keep it around, but like, no, this is important to us as a company. This is important to us as a people. And so when I talk about what does diversity mean to you as a personal commitment, what I also realized when those positions were being cut, it also made me feel, well, who was not championing for that person in that department? Because it wasn't a singular decision that was made, right? Like when you're downsizing on a company, there are committees that are put together. There are boardrooms, there are convenings, there are Zoom sessions, and collectively quite a few people are making that decision of saying that is not important in this moment.
So that's kind of the dark underside of what's been happening this year. And I don't think many of us were aware of it. You were getting rave reviews in the chat. People are congratulating the board for being so great about finding you. So you're making us look good, and they're very inspired. Some people are saying, oh, we could have a whole day with her. And I think the comment that you're going to like the best is your daughter's really lucky to have you for a mom.
I'm really lucky to have her. Like, I'm really lucky. When Mary and I first talked, we were talking about coming I was going to drive to the West Coast and we are going to like do a whole day. And
yeah, her daughter was going to need to stay at a hotel on the beach, and we owe her one. Thank you so much, Felecia. And I want everybody to thank you as well. And
I'll be here for the rest of the party. I'll be here for the rest of the party.
All right, good. So I am going to ask you all to get your box out. Yes. And does everybody have their box? I want to see those boxes. You ready? Okay, so I meant to have a knife with me and I don't, so here I go ruining my nail. So let's open our boxes. If you can, I want you to know that this whole thing was designed by Tanya.
Quite an adventure.